AWS RDS Proxy may not be the set and forget tool that you thought it was. And if you still struggle with open database connections after setting it up, here's what could be the problem. We recently had a client reach out to us for help with their RDS proxy. And the issue was that it was not working as intended. And they initially set it up to solve a problem with their Lambda functions, making too many connections to their MySQL RDS server. And what would happen is that there was a peak in usage, so a lot of calls to their AWS Lambdas. And then that would clog the connections to the MySQL server, and the app would crash or slow down. So initially, they set up an RDS proxy, thinking it would solve the problem. We thought it would solve the problem, and some time passed, and then again, the same thing happened. So even after adding the RDS proxy, their app crashed after having a peak in requests to their Lambda functions. So that was a bit fishy. So we started investigating and saw that we had a lot of database connections that basically match their client connections. So that was basically saying, hey, this RDS proxy is not doing what it is meant to do, right? It is supposed to absorb a lot of client connections, but then upstream just a few connections to the database, keep only a few connections and reuse the connections to the database. And that was not happening. But what was interesting is that we had another stat there that was also matching the same usage. And that stat was the database connections currently session pinned. So these are pinned connections. So we started investigating to see what the problem is and why each client connection had a matching database connection. Again, that led us to the pinned connections. And the pinned connection means basically that the RDS proxy will keep a one-to-one connection to the database and basically have a connection stuck on a specific session from the client. And the reason is usually related to the code and the type of transactions we're doing. So the next step was to actually look at the code. And to illustrate this, I've set up a small app, a small Lambda function, and set up an RDS proxy and a MySQL database in our lab environment. And I wanted to show you how that looks, and maybe it will solve your problem. So this is my code. And so is this example. We're using Golang, and we are using the MySQL driver to connect to the database. And what we have here is a function that basically does two simple database queries. So the first one is a select, a very simple one, right? We're selecting the usernames from the users. And then we're also updating the table. We're updating the hit count. Okay, so this is super simple, right? This is a very simple Lambda function. Barely does anything. But the problem lays here. And the problem is with the code. And the source is actually here, okay? So we're passing a variable to the query. So we're saying we want to get all the entries with this user ID. What turns out is that by default, the MySQL driver will pass this query to the database, expecting the database to actually take this username and this query and replace the username and prepare the statement in the database. And that behavior actually causes the pinned connection. So what we need to do is tell the database driver not to do that. We want to prepare everything on the Lambda side, on the server side, on our, in this case, the client side. We want to prepare the statement. So we want to have this select statement to pass as is with the user ID already in there. And to do that, we are going to add one single thing to the connection string, and that is to interpolate the parameters on the client side. And that's it. So here's what I'm going to do. So this is the fix. Okay, so just to illustrate it, let's see the actual problem live. And I'm using the AB tool. I'm going to make a lot of requests to the Lambda. So right now the Lambda function does not have this DSN suffix. It's just, this is empty, so we don't have this parameter. And what we're expecting to see is just the behavior I showed you earlier, right? Let's see. I will make a lot of requests to the Lambda. We're expecting the database connections to match the client connections and also the pinned sessions. So let's look at the stats. You can see from previous usage that our RDS proxy has kept a few connections open to the database, which is fine, but we expect it to increase. Yeah, and we see this exact behavior, right? We have the client connections is 40, and we have this database connections, and you can see that the query requests is not very high. We're probably getting a lot of errors on the app side because the database is clogged again. So now let's implement the fix here, re-upload the code to the Lambda function and make another request, and let's see how that actually behaves. Okay, so I'll try again. As you can see, we fixed the problem, right? We have no pinned connections. We have less database connections than client connections, and the queries just roll on, and we have a very high number because they're all passing and we don't have the bottleneck. So that actually fixed the problem. You might see that this count will go up. Client connections could go way up and still keep the database connections low, but that was the usage in this example. So this was a one-shot fix for our users with the DSN suffix. For your use case, you might need to dive into the code. Sometimes different queries work a little different, and maybe you will have to have some queries that will pin the connections, but most of them shouldn't. So what I wanted to show you here is that the RDS proxy may not be just something you put in and then it solves all of your problems. You may have a slightly bigger project lurking there for you to fix, but it is totally worth it, and you should be using the AWS proxy, especially if you're serverless. Then that makes a lot of sense. If you want to see this code example and if you want to read more, we have a blog post. You can click the link in the description, and if this helped you out, please click like on this video, and I'll see you in the next one.